Good morning. My name is Nadia K, and today I will be discussing implicit bias and diverse representation in workplaces. Over the past years and in the wake of major social and political changes, race has become the forefront of conversation in the media throughout the United States. And it is because of this we must ask the question, to what extent does implicit racial bias in media negatively impact diverse representations in the workplaces throughout the United States? This question brings me to my claim that the manifestation of implicit racial bias in media and marketing, despite outlawed discrimination, negatively impacts diverse representations in the workplace as it affects executive hiring and fuels existing prejudices. For this, we are looking at the impact on the United States working class citizens and the impact of covert racism on the allocation for opportunities of minorities. This is important as this issue extends to the concern that as society continues to become more diverse, there ideally should be increasing efforts to promote inclusion in various environments. Now, what is implicit bias? As defined by Simply Psychology, implicit biases are unconscious attitudes and stereotypes that can manifest in the workplace, school settings, healthcare, and the criminal justice system, as modern culture and media contribute to the development of such biases. In other words, these are unconscious social cognitions that provide us with perceptions of minorities and stereotypes associated with certain groups. For instance, marketing data and technology plays an important role in many of society's preconceived notions. Algorithms and machine learning are only as good as the information experts feed these models. And while it may not be something prevalent or noticeable, marketing data and technology are very influenced by biases from engineers, marketers, and developers who input, manipulate, and program data, in which these unconscious perceptions people inherit become crowdsourced. To further this idea, as Karen Howe of MIT Technology Review mentions, bias occurs during data collection when the training data reflects existing prejudices. It is clear to see that sources of media and marketing perpetuate bias that society should be moving away from. This builds on the fact that the lack of contact between racial groups leads people to rely on stereotyped depictions of minorities when interacting with people of color. Beyond these perceptions, racial images packed in the media can skew the standard of treatment of diverse groups in work promotion and development, working relationships, as well as diverse talent recruitment. To add on, research has shown that search firms take approaches that are predictive of who makes it to the semi-finalist stages. Proven record, fit with the region, fit with focus area. These are just some examples of criterion that more often than not tend to eliminate diverse candidates. This allows for only a small percentage of minorities to receive jobs that firms only use to fill a quota rather than hiring the best qualified candidate. This is further explored research on racism in a resume, as you can see portrayed to the left in this graph. Ideally, hiring candidates should be based on merit and the most qualified. However, bias seeps into the hiring process and affects how each candidate is evaluated and interviewed. This study by Bertrand and Melanathan tested this with resumes with either Caucasian or African American sounding names with equal qualifications, and found that for every 15 callbacks a Caucasian candidate received, an African American candidate received only 10. This didn't seem to be a matter of how common the names were or how apparent the social status of applicants were, but simply a fact of what the name suggested about the race of these fictional applicants. Following the hiring process, discrimination tends to linger in the standard of treatment towards minorities in the workplace. For example, bias affects negotiations of starting pay, future wages, and upward mobility. In essence, these disparities will continue to compound over time if not addressed, and as media continues to cultivate discrimination as well as a harsher standard of treatment. As you can see on this chart on the slide, employed adults who say they have experienced any of the 8 forms of discrimination in their workplace due to their race or ethnicity, the majority have been Asians, Hispanics, or African Americans, with over double the percentage of their Caucasian equivalents. This leads researchers to believe that discrimination, if not a leading reason, is a major reason that behind the underrepresentation of minorities in workplaces. To further this idea, as Lincoln Quillian from the Harvard Business Review puts it, while it's often difficult to measure levels of discrimination, over time, research into hiring discrimination shows that African Americans and people of color still face discrimination in the hiring process. On the other hand, it is argued that race has no longer become central in one's opportunities in life. However, research into discrimination continues to show that covert racism affects minorities and evaluates the discrepancy in companies' claims towards diversifying workforces. The meritocracy myth frame is an argument attributed to the claim that the underrepresentation of workers of color is natural because there are not enough competent non-white workers in the hiring pool, or they don't want to work hard enough. And as you can see on the right over here, when researchers displayed photos of successful African American individuals in politics and academia, some study participants claimed that race was no longer an important factor in the United States. However, underrepresentation is merely the result of biased hiring practices. It is clear, while people of color hold high positions in the workforce, it doesn't indicate that racial discrimination in hiring process has disappeared altogether. So how can companies implement more inclusive practices? It is clear to see that as racial and ethnic minorities continue to account for population growth and a more diverse nation, society requires comprehensive solutions to combat discrimination. So a proposed solution to this is first, training and objective hiring decisions. It is important for all interviewers and employers to make sure they make objective decisions with knowledge of discrimination laws. And when making hiring decisions, they should only take into account specific job requirements and the qualifications of applicants. Now, an implication with something like this is that resources such as time and money that would be utilized to train these employees and managers would be something utilized more than companies would like. So, for example, if corporate companies and local governments provided incentives for this, it could prove to be very useful in the future. Furthermore, promoting inclusion. Experts in technology claim that social media could be a powerful tool in addressing the less than remarkable representation of people of color as influencers, creators, and decision makers. And while solutions like these may not solve discrimination in the workplace or anywhere altogether, it provides a significant step closer to promoting ideals of equal opportunity and the greater movement towards racial equality. Thank you. What questions may you have?
I do have a couple questions for you. First up, what evidence did you gather that you didn't use, and why did you choose not to use it?
Some of the evidence that I gathered and didn't use was a lot about celebrities that were that didn't get equal opportunities when going into marketing roles, but I ended up not using that evidence because it didn't really it didn't provide a lot of evidence on how there's implicit bias in media, and rather that's more of marketers' choices. So it didn't directly help my presentation, so I didn't use it.
Okay. And then explain the level of certainty you are about your solution.
So I'm very certain about my solution of training and objective hiring decisions because some other evidence I gathered when writing my paper, I found that a lot of times when local governments enlisted or provided incentives for something like this, they were able to mitigate a lot of the bias and discrimination in the hiring process.